Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like months-long offers of low commission. At BetDAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAG is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAG, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly.
Hello and welcome back to the ROKER Report Extra podcast. Last time you joined us, Sunderland were level on points with second place Barnsley, but had 2 games in hand. A week later, with 2 points behind them, with 1 game in hand after 2 pretty concerning performances at home. Firstly towards Burton, which wasn't as bad as what was to come, which was probably that Coventry game, which was... Let's not get started on that if we're honest with each other. Darkness feels like it's descended on Wearside a little bit. I don't know why. Everyone's feeling a little bit negative, but essentially it's leading up to a massive game against Doncaster Rovers in front of the Sky TV cameras this Friday. To discuss all things Donny, we've got Paul Goodwin of the Donny Free Press, or the Doncaster Free Press if you prefer, who's covered Doncaster Rovers' progress this season. However, he's already my favourite extra guest because... despite his knowledge on Doncaster, he's only gone and been a bloody Sunderland fan. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Graham. Lovely intro, and pleasure to be with you. Yeah.
And the best part about it was I literally just messaged you because I was like, oh, he covers Doncaster. And then you went, well, I support Sunderland. And I thought, well, we've got to get you on. I think so. The big question to get out of the way first, you cover Doncaster Rovers, but you're a massive Lads fan. What's your story on that one?
Yeah, big Lads fan. Sunderland born and bred. As we've just talked off air, grew up in Fulwell, taken to Roker Park as a young lad, obviously. Then the Stadium of Light. So probably had a season ticket watching Sunderland for about 20 years. But at the same time, developed a love of writing, of sport. I'm a bit of a failed sportsman myself. I used to play cricket, but wasn't quite good enough to play at the top level. So I went down the sports journalism route. And got a foot in the door at Donny 2006. That the rest is history. It's obviously been an eventful time in Doncaster's history, as with Sunderland. And I never really expected this game to happen. Certainly not in League One. Anyway, it's crazy. It'll be a very strange feeling on Friday. Can't wait for it, but it'll be really weird too.
Yeah, I can imagine that being a bit odd. If I'm honest with you, it was odd just knowing you were a Sunderland fan at first, but like I say, played it perfectly into my hands.
The one thing is doing this job, you learn to become sort of objective as well, and your views on the game change a little bit. So it's not like I'll be turning up to the stadium like with my Sunderland scarf or anything like that. But looking forward to it all the time.
That's where I would struggle, you see. That's where I would struggle. So I better keep away from the sports journalism. On to Doncaster. I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty certain they're 5 points clear of 7th place Peterborough, 10 points behind 5th place Charlton. So I think realistically, it's looking like guaranteed playoffs. What's the feeling around the place at the moment?
Incredibly positive. I wouldn't quite go as far as to say the guaranteed 6. You're the second person actually associated with Sunderland that said that. But I still think they're in a real battle with Peterborough. And the irony there is, of course, their manager is a certain Darren Ferguson who left Doncaster under a bit of a cloud last summer. So I think there's still plenty to play for. There could be plenty more twists and turns in the race for the playoffs, as there will be in the race for that second spot. But the mood around the club is really positive. Grant McCann is a very positive guy. He sets his team up in a very positive way. And a lot of people might say they've overachieved this season, but inside the Doncaster camp, I think they think they've got the quality of player to compete at the top end of the table. And they've done really well. They've had a fantastic season. However it pans out now, whatever happens from here on in, they've had a fantastic season. There's obviously not the same pressure at a club like Doncaster that there is at Sunderland.
When you're looking at Doncaster as well, though, I mean, I said guaranteed playoffs. I mean, in further inspection, I said you're 5 points ahead of Peterborough, but Peterborough do have a game in hand.
Yeah, and of course you play Sunderland on Monday as well. It's incredible the way it's worked out. Yeah,
it's typical Sunderland the way it's worked out realistically. But One thing with Don, a lot of teams that finish sixth in the league, in the Championship, League One, League Two, are kind of those teams that have had that really good run towards the end of the season and just sneaked in. Doncaster haven't really done that. I think all season has been a top six that's been there, with Peterborough at the start being a little bit further up. So is there you've got to get there first, but is there a hope that you think you could win Doncaster could win the playoffs?
There definitely is. Yeah, if they get in there, they'll really fancy the chances. Like I say, they're a very positive young team. They've got no fear, really. One of my thoughts on the whole Ferguson era, Darren, maybe a bit like his dad. Maybe there was a little bit of a fear factor there in terms of the way he managed the team. He's quite an old school manager. He had that sort of persona around him. Grant McCann, not like that one bit. He's a very laid back guy. I think he's obviously a lot younger. He's only just finished playing himself, and he's kind of sort of released the shackles, if you like, around this team. And that's been a big thing in the way they've kicked on this season. There's no fear at all. And they've given a decent account of themselves when they've come up against the bigger teams this season, as Sunderland can testify. When they played at the Keepmoat in October, it was a cracking game. And if it wasn't for a couple of saves from John McLaughlin before half-time, Donny might have turned them over. So, no, if Donny get in the top six, they've got every chance.
And the big person you would look at any fan in League One, looking at Doncaster Rovers, would straight away look at John Marquis as the danger man. But when you look at his form, he's actually been going through a pretty bad dry spell. We were linked with him heavily in January, and I genuinely don't know if he's the player that thought he could double his wages, and that's what put us off him. I've got a feeling it might have been Tommy's, but I genuinely don't know. However, it wasn't just Sunderland that were after him. Has the January transfer window affected John Marquis then, do you think?
A few fans have mentioned that, but that's probably quite an easy accusation to label at him, because I don't think his form has dipped at all, really. What he does for this team is just he goes out there every single game. He puts his body on the line. He works his absolute, proverbials off for the team. He leads the line. He gives them something to play off. He sets the tone for the team as well with his work ethic. He's that sort of player. He's a grafter. He really is a grafter. He sets the tone, and you can never accuse John Marquis of not doing that. My only doubt about him, looking from a Sunderland perspective, when I saw that in January, for me, he's not a natural. It might sound silly, but he's not a natural finisher. He's got 23 goals this season, but for me, he's not really a natural born finisher. Like a Kevin Phillips, if you like. He's missed a lot of chances as well this season. He would probably say himself he could have had 30 goals. That's credit to the number of chances that this Doncaster team are creating game in, game out. But one thing about Marquis, he'll work for the team, and obviously I know how much that's appreciated up at Sunderland. That the fans would love that.
With Marquis as well, he's massive, isn't he? I mean, you mentioned about him not being an out-and-out striker. Who would you, from a Sunderland perspective, you're a Sunderland fan, who do you compare him to? Because I'll be honest, I haven't seen as much as I would like to of him.
Good question. He's kind of in between, isn't he? He's not. I wouldn't say he's an out-and-out target man, but I wouldn't say he's a natural-born finisher either. He's kind of in between. Why am I thinking about Danny Ditchio? I don't know. I don't know why that one sprung into my head.
Because you don't want to say Niall Quinn, because it's just too high praise for anyone.
Probably a ridiculous comparison, to be honest. But the one thing I would stress about Marquis, I keep going back, his work ethic is really second to none, and his teammates really appreciate that. Every game he comes off having given 120% for his team, and the way Doncaster set up, they set up slightly differently to Sunderland. They play 4-3-3. So you've got Marquis playing as a central striker and two wide men either side. And it's just worked. It's worked for him. He leads the line. He gets on the end of a number of chances. Like I say, he does miss a few chances as well, but 23 goals this season, you can't really complain too much. And I think his overall record since he came to Donny is something like 60 goals in 130 appearances, something like around that, which is not far away from a goal every 2 games, is it? Which is where you want to be as a striker. So I want to retract that Danny Ditchio comment.
I get what you mean, though. You know what I mean? It's like Dicho he had a style of play about him, but he also played in a team that had Quinn and Phillips and Bridges as well. You had three of the best strikers in probably our living memory all at the same time. So, I like Donny Dicho for those who can remember.
I'm glad you've gone with me with that one.
I always felt he was harshly done by Big Donny Dicho. He was a good DJ by all accounts as well. I liked it. Really delving back into the archives now, but he was injured was he injured on Saturday? Am I making that up?
He got a concussion in the win at Bradford, so it was the protocol where he had to sit that one out. But he will be back. He will be back on Friday, and I'm sure he'll be pumped up for it as well. Given he might downplay everything that's gone off in January, but I'm sure he'll be determined to go out there and show people what he can do.
And I don't know if you know anything more than what I would know, and I don't know anything really about it, but how close was that John Marquis to Sunderland thing happening? Was it all just pie in the sky, or was there genuine interest there?
As far as I know, 2 bids did go in. Doncaster came out afterwards and said we rejected a significant amount of money for John Marquis, and I think the feeling was that if it had happened earlier in the window, maybe the club might have taken a different view on it. But because it was so late, if Doncaster had sold John Marquis, there was no chance of getting a replacement in. So you were basically saying that almost that the season's over from that point, because he is such a pivotal player in the way this team set up. He is such a key man.
And it was like a last day bid. I mean, I was covering the transfer deadline day as best as I could, and when I remember the players that we were getting linked to, you had like the likes of Sam Winnall, Marquis, scarily Ched Evans at one point.
I was with my Sunderland fan hat on. I was cringing at what was going on. To be honest, it was desperation, wasn't it? But we got there in the end.
We did. And the big question I wanted to ask, as a Sunderland fan who watches Doncaster, given the choice, if you had Will Grigg or John Marquis, who would you take?
I'll tell you what, that is another very, very good question. And I would have to stick with Marquis from what I've seen. Do you mean to go into the Sunderland side, or just in general?
To go into the Sunderland side, I think the style of play and things like that, yeah.
The only thing is, John Marquis and Charlie Wyke, I'm not sure that would work. No.
No.
So if you're looking at a potential partnership, you'd stick with Grigg and Wyke, wouldn't you? Little man, big man.
Sorting the defence out first.
Yeah. Well, you said it. I tuned into the Burton game last Tuesday, and you could see the signs, couldn't you? You could see the signs that things were going slightly wrong. And I actually said before the game on Saturday, I was chatting to Gary McSheffrey, an ex-Coventry City legend, of course.
Oh, God, I remember Gary McSheffrey. Opening day of the season, Rico Arena. Yes, I remember him well.
I said to him, I'm a little bit nervous today. Your boys could get a result at the Stadium of Light. Well, I never expected a scoreline like that. I wasn't, in all honesty, I wasn't totally surprised that Coventry got a result, but the scoreline and the way that it's happened is just ridiculous.
It was just bizarre. And I think you mentioned as well, and I mean, I'll put my hat in the ring. I like Jack Ross. I think calls for him to be sacked is completely wrong, but I definitely am frustrated that he played that formation against Burton. The warning signs were all there. We conceded 3 goals by half time, and he proceeded to continue with it. I get you've got to go with what you think is the right thing to do, but I think that you said it yourself. The alarm bells were absolutely ringing at that Burton game, and Doncaster are the best of the 3 teams that were playing, and you start to worry. What is he going to do? You want Cattermole back realistically, I think, to drop back in. But that brings me on to sort of Doncaster's midfield. You mentioned before you play a 4-3-3, and you do look at Marquis because football fans naturally look at goals. But when you're looking at the EFL Team of the Year, you've got a young lad in on loan, Herbie Kane, who's been absolutely phenomenal, and he came back on Saturday. How impressed have you been with him this season?
Oh, absolutely fantastic. It's funny going back to the summer. Doncaster signed 2 young kids, Herbie Kane, Malik Wilkes. Everybody thought, who are these lads? We've not really heard anything. Are we going to make any progress with a couple of young lads on loan? but the pair of them have been absolutely outstanding. And Herbie Kane, the way he started the season, his form dipped a little bit after the new year, but fantastic, and obvious like-for-like comparisons with a certain Steven Gerrard, really, just the way he goes about his game. All action, energy, tenacity. He's got vision as well. He played one pass on Saturday, absolutely superb. Just, he sees things early. He really does. He sees the picture of the game earlier than a lot of players do. I think he's only 20-year-old, I think. Massive potential. I would expect him to play in the Championship next season, hopefully with Doncaster. And just keep an eye out for him. Serious talent, serious player, and one I think the Sunderland fans would appreciate again. Just the sheer work ethic that he gets to. He loves a tackle. I'm making him sound like some player here, and I'll probably have a on Friday. But as for a young lad, one of the most talented young players I think I've seen for a long time. At that level. Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of things as well there that I have heard. I've heard the comparisons to Gerrard, and I've been keeping a close eye on him because I wanted to educate myself as best as I could on this league, and he was one of the names that popped up immediately. And you mentioned about energy, and you mentioned a big thing which I've heard a lot about Herbie Kane is that he sees things that other players in this league don't see. And
definitely.
Bearing in mind he's 20-year-old. I mean, there's certain players in this league, and you can't lack the commitment, you can't lack the fight, and the fitness levels are great. But I think the difference in quality is people like Aidan McGeady and stuff like that. They see things before anyone else does, and that's what sets them apart. And Herbie Kane's massively being touted as one of those players that can just pull something out of nothing in terms of his passing and his movement.
You've got it or you haven't, and this kid's got it. He actually played in a slightly different role on Saturday in the win over Plymouth. Actually played in a bit of a deeper, more defensive midfield role, but he came back into the side. He's had a bit of a groin injury since the turn of the year, which has affected his form, and then he was out for about 4 weeks, but he came back on Saturday and he looked refreshed, recharged. So Sunderland are getting him, coming up against him at just the wrong time, I'm afraid. He does. He looks really good again.
And I think there's a lot of people, me probably included, would like to see Cattermole come back. But then the more you think about it, the level of energy he has of the midfielders that we've got, he's probably likely to cause somebody like Lee Cattermole the most problems.
Interesting you should mention that, because Herbie spoke to the press today, and I mentioned the head-to-head with Lee Cattermole, and going up against a former Premier League player, somebody like that, would he relish it? He kind of just laughed at me and laughed it off, and it was almost like, I'm really not fussed who I play against. He's not rattled by anything. There's no fear factor in him at all. He just goes out there and he lets his sort of skills and vision do the work, really. There's no kind of thought process about, this might be Lee Cattermole, he might stop me playing. Nothing like that. He's going out there to put his stamp on the game. And I think he made reference to the fact that Cattermole went off at half-time at the Keepmoat. I can't quite recall if that was. I've got no reason to doubt him, but that must yeah. And we had a bit of a laugh about that as well. So no fear at all, and he'll really relish playing in such a big arena, big crowd, because that's where he'll see his future.
And on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from young players, I've got to look at an ex-Newcastle academy. Well, he wasn't even academy. He was a Sunday League player, James Coppinger, who's been he's been in Doncaster longer than you've been in Doncaster, and you've been there quite a while.
The evergreen James Coppinger, yeah, I'm sure he'll be fired up a little bit for Friday. He's not getting any younger, is he? But he just gets better and better, to be honest, gets better with age. He's been absolutely phenomenal as a player, as an ambassador, really, for the club. A pleasure to watch at times. Again, another player who is just gifted with certain skills, really. His close control, his ability to see things. And he's one of those players that really should have played at a much higher level. Do you think he'll get some stick on Friday, Alan?
I think he might be all right.
Yeah.
I think people are too blooming nervous, aren't they? But then again, I thought I didn't really think Andy Cook would get too much stick for Walsall, but I feel like we can almost sniff out a scummer. Do you know what I mean? You can sniff it out as somewhere, but I can't believe that he's got 13 assists this season. I mean, that is phenomenal.
Still got it. He's still got it massively. He's played as part of the front three, so last season he was kind of playing at the tip of a midfield diamond where he probably had to be a bit more disciplined. And although that got him involved a bit more, he's had a bit more freedom, I guess, playing up in the front three this season. And I suppose one of the criticisms of Coppinger during his career is that he maybe hasn't scored enough goals, or maybe at times lacked a killer ball. But he's produced it in abundance again this season. And like I say, on his days, he's a real pleasure to watch. And he's on the left side of things. So for me, he is one of the big threats actually for Sunderland. Him against Luke O'Nien could be an interesting battle.
I really think so. And I mean, if you're listening, Luke, which I hope to God you are, because that would be great, don't take it offensively, but I think the experiment of Luke O'Nien at right back's time to be ended. I think there's a few times he's been caught short. I think the kid's done his best, but I definitely think an opportunity in the middle is what he deserves, because it worries me that he comes up against someone with that level of experience in James Coppinger. And I don't think it started as an experiment and it's done well, but I'd much rather, although I don't think he's fit, Adam Matthews slot in there. So potentially, because he's not fit, he might be Luke O'Nien anyway. But that's just my thoughts on that.
He could become the latest victim of the famous Coppinger chop on Friday. He's got a certain move that he does, and it just seems every League One fullback seems to fall for it, to be honest. And that's where he's got a lot of his assists from this season.
His assist level is beyond belief. I think it's him and Ashley Hunter are currently sitting top of the assists for the division. And when you think that there is players like Aidan McGeady that are in this division, for them to be so far ahead of people like that, it's and a team that is, not necessarily right at the top of the league, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? Especially at 38 years of age.
Yeah, you beat me to it. He's a credit to himself, really, the way that he's looked after himself, and to be able to prolong his career. And not just that, he's still running around like a 20-something, genuinely is. You'd look at him, you wouldn't think he was 38. And I think, knowing James, he'll want to play until he's 40 probably, and I don't see any reason why he can't.
Not on this season's form, not at all. Going back to the game, and obviously I think it was November now, we won that 1-0. It was a really tight game. You mentioned before about John McLaughlin, I think, pulled off some cracking saves first half. And second half, obviously, it was a close range Chris Maguire goal, who we're hoping's back on Friday. I will say Saturday. I almost said it there, but it is Friday. You obviously keep an eye on Sunderland closer than any guest that I've had. I know that. But how do you see from a non-Sunderland supporting perspective and a non-Doncaster Rovers reporter, how do you see Friday going? What are you expecting the game to be like?
Yeah, Doncaster, there'll be no question of Doncaster going there to shut up shop or defend or anything like that. Like I say, they're a very positive team. They'll go there fully intent on trying to impose their game on Sunderland, and they'll have a go. They'll have a go. They'll not commit hara-kiri. They'll not go gung-ho, but they'll try and impose themselves on Sunderland. They know all about the situation with the crowd, how the atmosphere can change very quickly up there, and they'll hope that works in their favour. It's a pretty obvious thing to say, but that the first goal could be absolutely massive, couldn't it, on Friday?
Enormous.
You know as well as me, if Doncaster were to go ahead, if Doncaster start this game well and go ahead, the atmosphere could turn sour, rightly or wrongly.
I agree with that.
If it goes the other way and Sunderland get the noses in front early on, then they could control the game. Doncaster's away record isn't great. They've only won one away game since the turn of the year. That was last weekend at Bradford. For whatever reason, it hasn't worked for them on the road. So there are vulnerabilities there for Sunderland to prey on. But I think Doncaster, we touched upon it earlier, looking back at the Coventry game, imagine being in that Doncaster team meeting, looking at the video of Sunderland against Coventry. You'd be rubbing your hands with glee, wouldn't you? Especially such an attacking team who are fluid going forward. They like to get forward. They like to cause problems. Marquis, play off him. they'll be looking forward to Friday. Trust me, they'll be looking forward to it.
Especially with Marquis, we're touching on it before that he scored so many goals, but he's gone through a bit of a dry spell. I think if you're watching that defensive performance that you've seen on Saturday, and the defensive performance against Burton wasn't great either. You're rubbing your hands and you're thinking,
totally.
I can get back on form and I can hit 25 goals. Oh God, I feel suddenly very negative. This is not very nice at all.
Do you think he will? Do you think he will? I mean, he can't go 4-4-2 again, can he, Jack Ross? Can he?
He can't. He just can't. You know, I think, and I have to hold my hands up. I criticised him previously, and I think I actually said he was crap. I'm sure someone's favoured it somewhere. Hopefully they forgot about it. But Dylan McGeoch, I think we lose so much when McGeoch's not playing. I think when he's played in games this season, they're just someone that just sweeps stuff up and gives them a little bit of protection. You look at the likes of Cattermole and Ledbetter being the men, that kind of do that job, but I think there's no one better than McGeoch for dropping deep, winning the possession and distributing it correctly and just taking that little bit of pressure off what is quite evidently a pretty poor set of centre-halves. I don't think you'll change it wholesale. I don't think he'll take out Baldwin and Flanagan. I think he'll put Jimmy Dunn in. I think Jimmy Dunn's strength and I was going to say athleticism, but he doesn't have much speed on him either. He runs like a robot. I think he's probably got a bit more strength to go up against Marquis than, I mean, you can't play Flanagan and Baldwin. You just can't. The confidence base, they're going to be destroyed. But I don't think that the idea of a 3-5-2 is all that bad, but it doesn't seem to get looked at. It's either 4-5-1 or that 4-3-3 or 4-4-2. I don't think a 3-5-2 with maybe Flanagan on the right is sort of like a right back or right-hand sided centre-half would be the worst idea on the planet, alongside maybe Jimmy Dunn, Ozturk, and potentially Baldwin on the other side. I think the more centre-halves the better, because I think there's not two of them good enough.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to see what he does. But like I say about Doncaster, they do really like to sort of play through the thirds, intricate passing through the midfield, and the instructions will be obvious, won't it? To put the centre-backs under pressure, to give them something to think about, for Marquis to ruffle a few feathers. And then you've got Cops coming in from the left flank, and somebody who we haven't mentioned yet, Malik Wilkes, another young lad they got in on loan. He's been the form player, and you say Marquis hasn't scored a few goals recently, but this lad Malik Wilkes has stepped up to the plate recently. Left-footed, playing on the right, loves to cut inside, so he's another one to keep an eye on.
One thing I did want to ask, and you'll probably know this better than anyone, you're probably the best place to answer this question, but from a Sunderland side, obviously on paper, we've been a bit off colour the past couple of weeks, but we are one of the better sides in that league, and that's why we are where we are. So which players are most likely, in your opinion, to cause damage to Doncaster? Like, where is Doncaster's weak links, and how can we as a team punish them?
Thought you might ask that. Doncaster they've got a habit of conceding from set pieces. I'll give you that one. That is something that Sunderland will be looking at. They're not the biggest of sides. We've got a couple of big centre halves who actually were out. The irony here, given what we've been discussing, but Andy Butler and Paul Downing, it was, who played centre back in the last game. They were outstanding, the pair of them. But they're the two biggest. Other than that, Doncaster are quite a small side, and they have had problems defending set pieces. The other area of weakness I think that teams will pinpoint for Doncaster is probably the full-back area. Danny Andrew at left-back, he's not had a bad season, but the other side is probably a problem. Matty Blair has done a sterling job in there, but he's a winger. He's not a full-back. He admits it himself. He's not a natural defender. So whoever plays on that left side for Sunderland, be it McGeady or Morgan, will probably fancy the chances of causing a problem or two down that left.
A lot of it hinges on McGeady being fit as well. And I think at the time of speaking, I think Jack Ross actually said that he still hasn't trained all week, and we shouldn't have really brought him on Saturday, which was another thing that confused me a bit. If he's not ready, don't bring him on. But I'm sure he knows better than I do. Maguire could be back, but again, he's not played since February. So Gooch is 50-50, I think. So you're potentially looking at Lewis Morgan, who has been on form. You mentioned the winger who was playing at sort of right back. Is it left back or right back at the moment?
Matty Blair, filling in at right back. He's not done a bad job, but he's not a natural defender, and that is probably something that opposing teams look at. Unfortunately, for a story that we won't delve too much into, but Niall Mason played at right back for much of the season. Good player, and then he did something really silly, so he's no longer available for selection.
Yeah.
So Rovers are having to make do in that position, really. But like you say, I think if Aidan McGeady's name isn't on the team sheet come 4 o'clock on Friday.
5 or something, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think that's a natural.
Saturday, and I was trying to work out, and my Google was showing me in Swedish time, and I was all over the shop. I'm thinking 6:15, 5:15, but 5:15, I think, is it? For those wondering, don't be late. It's 5:15.
Yeah, if McGeady's name isn't on that team sheet, I think there's a natural lift in the Doncaster dressing room, because he is a player that's way too good for this level.
Yeah, I think McGeady is the best player in the division. I've said that a few times. I think Lyle Taylor potentially, but I think you immediately would get a lift if Aidan McGeady's not in the team, no matter which League One side that you may be. Hopefully he comes through and he's fit enough to play. So you've mentioned sort of how the team would set up, and you set up in a 4-3-3. Marcus were expecting to be there as well. So I suppose prediction's probably quite a big thing. I expect Doncaster to come at us. I think you've mentioned before, from when I've seen Doncaster as well, I don't think Grant McCann necessarily looks at the weaknesses of other teams. I think he looks at the strength of his own and goes for that, doesn't he?
That's it, completely, yeah.
We've got to win. I think we know that. So I think if we're looking at a score prediction, you could quite easily go for a high scoring one. Hopefully not a Coventry
5-4
in favour. God, I hope not. But
I'm thinking totally similar lines to you. I think there's bound to be goals. At the risk of jinxing it completely, I think it would be 2-2's the scoreline I've got in my head, which would be a scoreline that wouldn't be much good for Sunderland. I think Doncaster would be very happy to come away with a point, but like I say, they'll not go there with the mentality of playing for a draw. They'll fancy the chances, especially with the background that the last couple of games that Sunderland have had. Doncaster will go there and fancy the chances of getting a result. I'm going to sit totally on the fence and say 2-2 or 1-1.
I'm nervous as well, and for the first time I think I've ever done that this season, and people might think badly of me here because I've been quite positive this season, but I'm going to say 2-1 Doncaster.
You've surprised me with that one.
I honestly feel like not confident about Friday, and I think for some reason there's been this huge cloud of darkness which I'm not enjoying. I don't know where I know where it's came from, the defeat and the performance, but it's so much negativity right now. It's kind of worrying me a little bit, and I know what it can be like, and especially in front of the Sky TV cameras. I can see a bit of an Accrington at home game like it was a few months ago, which obviously we got a draw out of, but Doncaster are a better side, unfortunately for us. But hopefully, egg on my face this time next week, and we've beaten both Doncaster and Peterborough.
We'll see. Yeah, I think it'll be, from Sunderland's perspective, for both teams' perspective, you just want to get results now, isn't it? It's all about the result. But I think we're in for another good game Friday. Like I say, I really enjoyed the game at the Keepmoat Stadium. It was a bit old school, really, the way the two teams went at each other. They really did. It was no holds barred, and I'm in for a treat if it's going to be something similar to that again.
Thanks very much for coming on, Paul. Are you going to be in the press box with your red and white scarf on, though?
Red Rovers scarf? No. Completely objective and there to do a job, of course.
Yeah. That's what they all say. But
absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's a bit of an honour being a Sunderland lad, and obviously, hopefully, Sunderland can end the season on a high and get the job done as well.
We'll be fine. Sunderland and second, Doncaster through the playoffs. That sounds about right.
Well, you'll be in the Championship next season.
That would be ideal for you. But thanks very much for coming on, Paul. I hope you're smiling as much as I am at the end of the season. And I never say that to any guests. I normally say, don't enjoy your weekend, but I'm going to say you enjoy it, because I think if Sunderland win out, I assume you'll be a little bit more pleased than most of our guests. So I was going to say enjoy your trip down, but you know what it looks like. You know the area. You're from Forwell.
Yeah, it'll be weird. It'll be a strange one, but can't wait for it now. Really excited, and hopefully, it's you've shocked me a little bit with the whole negativity talk around the stadium. I totally understand what you're saying. Big game, really, really big game for both teams.
Massive, and hopefully it's 3 points for Sunderland. Hopefully.
You said that.
Right, my man. Thanks very much for coming on. You have
Cheers,
a good rest of
Graham.
the night. Cheers,
Spot
Paul.
on. Thank you.
So I haven't done a little summary at the end of my extra podcast for a little while. Kind of just prefer leaving it at the end, but here we go. Nonetheless, I do like the sound of my own voice now and again. Yeah, I'm feeling a bit negative about Friday. I really hope that hasn't put anyone in a bad mood, but I think it was really good to get Paul on. I think Paul obviously knows a lot about Doncaster and just as much about Sunderland, being a boy from Forwell. Really enjoyed having a chat with him. I hope very much that I'm proven incorrect when it comes to my scoreline prediction. It's the first time I've been negative this season, so if you think I'm being a little bit overly negative, give me a break. It's only the first time in nearly 40 matches, and I hope that you are all laughing at me come this time next week. Hope you enjoyed the podcast again. Thanks as always for checking out the ROKER RAPPORT Extra podcast and listening to it. It's done, for the fans, and hopefully you enjoy the fact that we do it for you and you enjoy what we're doing. And hopefully by the time we speak next time, we've got another 6 points in the bag. Thanks for checking us out. I've been Graham, and this has been the ROKER RAPPORT Extra podcast.
Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like month-long offers of low commission. At BetDAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAG is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAG, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly.